the story. I apologize for going over, but I just want to share a story with you guys. 8 years ago, I was selling homes with Ryan at KB and Sandy at KB Home. Driving an hour and 15 minutes each way, sitting in a little sales trailer, 60 hours a week, missing my son grow up. That just kind of comes with the job, you know? And it comes with wanting more, but not having the right vehicle. And I got home at night, at about 9 o'clock at night, I got a phone call. Now, my dad had moved to Oklahoma 12 years earlier. It always kind of made me sad that I never got to go see him that much because I worked for somebody, and I always said, man, I always joked and said, I'm running out of grandmas. I'm running out of grandmas. Because I always had to lie and say something happened to one of my grandmas or my wife's grandma to get off for a week to go visit my dad in Oklahoma. None of us have ever done that. I think I'm probably the only one that's guilty. We don't have so many grandmas you can tell is ill or something. That's not the way to get off work, but it was the only way to really get off work. And I was always sad that I never got to go see my dad so much. You know, he used to live right here, but he had a dream to go back to where he was born and raised, a little town in Oklahoma, and have cattle and have land and bale hay. That's his dream. And he did it. And 8 years ago, I got a phone call at 10 o'clock at night, right after I got home, about an hour after I got home, from my cousin Toby to tell me that my dad was in an ambulance en route to the hospital, and he probably wasn't going to make it. Instantly I thought, well, I'm not ready to lose my dad. Now, we're never ready to lose our loved ones, but I still needed him. I still wanted his advice. I still called him if I decided to buy something or not. I valued his opinion. I always value my parents. But I still needed him, you know, to help me become a great father, like he was. And my cousin said, it's not looking good. I said, okay. Can you put me on the phone with Dawn, which is my dad's wife, my bonus mom? And she said, it's not looking good. They told us he won't make the drive. He lives out in the country, and it's a 35 to 40-minute drive to the hospital. So the ambulance made it to his house. They couldn't, having a hard time getting to breathe. He was bleeding out of his ears, out of his nose, out of his mouth, and he was almost unconscious. Well, it turns out he suffered a thoracic aneurysm, ruptured on his aorta. Now, if you tell most doctors that this is what he had, they'll say, oh, you must be mistaken. Nobody survives that. But this is what had happened to him. He went to the hospital in Podo, Podo, Oklahoma. It's close to Podo. Podo. It's the next town from Podo. Eastern Oklahoma, he went to this little hospital, and when they saw him, they said, we can't touch him. We don't have anybody qualified to help him. Well, the next hospital is Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's about a 45-minute to an hour drive. And they said, well, we'll take him to the hospital, but we're out of helicopters. They're all being used right now, so we got to drive him. And the likelihood of him making it is slim to none, but we'll drive him. So they drive him. Turns out he beat the odds again. He made it to the hospital. I'm frantically trying to find a flight. I would do it on the phone now. I guess then I was on the computer trying to find a flight and get to Oklahoma. So hopefully I can talk to my dad before he dies, if that's what God's will was. So I'm driving, I get on a flight, I go to Oklahoma, I land, I make a phone call, he's still alive. And I'm very thankful that he's still alive. I get driven to the airport, to the hospital. It's about an hour and a half, almost 2-hour drive from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Fort Smith, Arkansas, the hospital he was at. Just turns out that the best doctor in Arkansas, heart doctor, was off duty, had been on duty, and he was only at that hospital 1 day a week, but he hadn't left yet. And he told my stepmom, he said, Don, I'll operate on Jerry, but there's a less than 5% chance that he'll make it off the operating table. People don't come in with what he has and walk out very often. Same thing that killed John Ritter in 8 hours. And so he went through the operation to validate that they didn't think that he'd make it. When they sewed him up with the baling wire or whatever, his rib cage, you know, they didn't even snip it off good. He had to go back in later and dip him down. Anyways, they opened up his chest, removed his heart, froze his body, hooked it up to a bypass, did whatever work they needed to do on his big heart, thawed him out, put him back in, and I get to the hospital a few hours later. And I want to go into the room in ICU so I can talk to my dad. There's some things that I wanted to talk to him about. And Dawn goes, Tommy, you're not going to recognize your dad. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, his liver shut down, his kidneys shut down, he's gone through 13 units of blood. He's yellow because his liver's not functioning, because he went without blood for so long. And he's swollen, his head's twice its size, his hands are really big. He just doesn't look like your dad. And so I said, okay, I'm prepared. Let's go. So we went in, and my stepmom goes, my dad's laying down on the chair, breathing, the machines are keeping him alive, and which was life-changing for me. The strongest man that I ever knew, the toughest man I ever knew, had no control. See, I've always wondered something. When I was a kid growing up, racing motocross, I saw a lot of airbags coming from the motocross track. The National in Las Vegas. It's always windy in Las Vegas, isn't it? Her son races motocross. I remember sitting on the starting line watching 3 or 4 airbags go before I took off, because the wind would blow you when you try to jump a jump, and if you were going to be competitive, you've got to clear the jumps, and sometimes some kids would get hurt. And I always wondered, when I used to drive back and forth from California to different races, when I'd almost fall asleep, I always thought it'd be so easy just to give up. It'd be so easy just to close my eyes and doze. It'd be easy. That's what people do. They take the path of least resistance. But we choose to live, so we don't close our eyes most often. But I've always wondered, if you were dying, if you were in a situation where you're in an air vac, you're in an ambulance, you're in intensive care, and it's not a sudden death, I always wondered if you have any say in whether you live or die. I always wondered if you can decide to stay awake, to roll the windows down, to splash yourself with water, to pull over and take a nap. I always wondered if you had a choice in whether you lived or died. And I decided that I wanted to talk to my dad, to tell him to not quit, to try, to choose to live. Anyhow, we go in there and Don goes, Jerry! Jerry! Tommy's here! And his eyes, he's on all kinds of medications, just thawed. And his eyes rolled up in his head. They opened and his eyes rolled up, saw the whites of his eyes, and that's the closest thing I saw to his eyes. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I want to open my eyes to that either. Jerry! So we go back, now not my stepmom. So we go back out into the waiting room, and the family's there, and my Uncle Tom's there, and my cousins are there, and my dad's friends were there. And I remember sitting there thinking that, no, I want to talk to my dad. There's things that I want to get off of my chest. I want to talk to him about his faith. I wanted to, because he don't talk to my dad about that. He never talks about that. I don't know what he believes, but I want to know right now if I'm going to have a shot at ever knowing. So I go back in there, and I just went like this.